Russian forces are continuing to focus their main efforts on the Kupiansk, Lyman, Bakhmut, Avdiivka and Marinka fronts, where fierce fighting continues, with 22 clashes between Russian and Ukrainian forces taking place today alone. Source: General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine on Facebook. Information is of 1800 on the 12th of July. Quote from the General Staff: "On the Kupiansk front, Ukrainian forces are holding the line. Russian forces carried out an airstrike in the vicinity of Kyslivka, Kharkiv Oblast. Fyholivka, Novomlynsk, Dvorichna, Zapadne, Kupiansk and Kyslivka, Kharkiv Oblast came under Russian mortar and artillery fire. On the Lyman front, Russian forces conducted unsuccessful offensive operations in the vicinity of Novosibirsk, Luhansk Oblast, over the course of today. They conducted airstrikes in the vicinity of Fyholivka, Luhansk Oblast, and Spern, Vesel and Rozdilivka, Donetsk Oblast. More than 10 civilian settlements were shelled, including Fyholivka, Luhansk Oblast, and Torsky, Spern, Berestov and Rozdilivka, Donetsk Oblast. Details: On the Bakhmut front, Russian forces conducted airstrikes on areas in and around Stupochki, Oleksandro Shultin and Fyholivka, Donetsk Oblast. Over 15 settlements, including Lyman, Bodanivka, Kromu, Ivanovsky and Teresk, Donetsk Oblast came under Russian fire. On the Avdiivka front, Ukraine's defense forces successfully repelled Russian air and artillery-supported assaults in the vicinity of Avdiivka, Pervomaisk and Nevelsky. Russian forces conducted an airstrike near Pantelymonivka, Donetsk Oblast, and shelled over 15 civilian settlements, including Avdiivka, Berdichi, Vesel, Vodian and Zeland Persh, Donetsk Oblast. On the Marinka front, Ukrainian forces are continuing to hold back Russian forces near Marinka. The Russians conducted an airstrike in the vicinity of Krasnohorivka and shelled more than 10 civilian settlements, including Krasnohorivka, Marinka, Fyholivka, Maximilianivka and Katerinivka, Donetsk Oblast. On the Shakhtarsk front, Russian forces conducted airstrikes near Zolotaniva, Makarivka and Rivnopil, and shelled Novomykhailivka, Vuhledar, Novokranka, Prekostivka, Vlika Novosilka and Zolotaniva, Donetsk Oblast. Russian forces on the Zaporizhia and Kherson fronts are focusing their efforts on preventing Ukrainian forces from advancing. They shelled over 20 civilian settlements, including Temirivka, Novodarivka, Chervon, Huliaipol, Zaliznikny and Orikhiv, Zaporizhia Oblast, Nikopol, Dnepropetrovsk Oblast, and Berislav, Vesel, Antonivka, Bilozerka and Kherson Oblast. Meanwhile, Ukraine's defense forces continued to conduct offensive operations on the Melitopol and Berdyansk fronts, where they are engaging in counter-battery fire. The Dunat Dun hotel in the Russian-occupied city of Berdyansk, Zaporizhia Oblast, was attacked. A large number of Russian military personnel were killed in the attack. Russian forces ramped up counterintelligence measures in the temporarily occupied city of Mariupol, Donetsk Oblast. Russian occupation forces are raiding residential buildings and people's apartments, where they inspect local residents' documents and mobile devices in an effort to intimidate them and uncover those who might be helping Ukraine's defense forces. The operational situation on the Volyn and Polishcha fronts remains much the same as before. Russia continues to maintain its forces on the Severshchina and Slobozhenshchina fronts. Over the course of today, Russian forces deployed mortars and artillery to fire on more than 10 civilian settlements, including Huta Studentska, Chernihiv Oblast, Vintorivka and Manukivka, Sumy Oblast, and Vidrodjanivsky, Izbitsky and Zemlyanki, Kharkiv Oblast. Over the course of the day, Ukrainian aircraft carried out 6 airstrikes on areas where Russian military personnel, weapons and equipment were concentrated and 2 on Russian air defense systems. Units of Ukraine's rocket forces and artillery struck a Russian command post, 16 field artillery units, 4 anti-aircraft defense systems, and 2 electronic warfare systems. Over 35 combat engagements with Russians occur on the 12th of July, General Staff report. The Ukrainian Defense Forces and the Russian occupation troops had over 35 combat engagements on 5 fronts over the course of the 12th of July. Source: General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine on Facebook. Information is of 6 o'clock on the 13th of July. Quote: Last night, Russia launched another attack on Ukraine with Iranian-made Shahed attack UAVs. Information on the aftermath of this terrorist attack is currently being confirmed. Over the past 24 hours, Russian occupiers attacked Ukraine with Iranian-made Shahed attack drones. A total of 15 kamikaze drones were used. As a result of successful combat operations, the Ukrainian Defense Forces destroyed 11 attack UAVs. In total, the enemy carried out more than 60 airstrikes and fired from multiple launch rocket systems on the positions of our troops and on settlements 64 times. Unfortunately, civilians, including children, have been killed and wounded, and residential buildings and other civilian infrastructure facilities have been damaged. The likelihood of missile and air strikes across Ukraine remains high. The enemy continues to focus its main efforts on the Kupiansk, Lyman, Bakhmut, Avdiivka and Marinka fronts, and heavy fighting continues there. Over 35 combat engagements took place over the last day. Details. The situation remains unchanged on the Volyn and Polysha fronts. There is no evidence that Russia is forming offensive units on those fronts. Meanwhile, units of the Belarusian armed forces are carrying out operations in areas near the Belarusian-Ukrainian border. Russia continues to maintain its forces on the Severshchina and Slobozhanshchina fronts. Over the course of the past 24 hours, Russian forces deployed mortars and artillery to fire on more than 10 civilian settlements, including Studenetska, Chernihiv Oblast, Vintorivka and Manukivka, Sumy Oblast, and Vidrozhenovsky, Izbitsky and Zemlyanki, Kharkiv Oblast. Ukrainian forces are holding the line on the Kupiansk front. Russian aircraft struck areas in and around Kyslivka, Kharkiv Oblast. Fyholivka, Novomlynsk, Dvorichna, Zapadne, Kupiansk and Kyslivka, Kharkiv Oblast came under Russian mortar and artillery fire. On the Lyman front, Russian forces conducted unsuccessful offensive operations in the vicinity of Novosibirsk, Luhansk Oblast, and carried out airstrikes in and around Bilohorivka, Luhansk Oblast, and Spern, Vesel and Rozdalivka, Donetsk Oblast. They also shelled over 15 settlements, including Nevsky, Serebryanka Forest and Bilohorivka, Luhansk Oblast, and Spern, Berestov and Rozdalivka, Donetsk Oblast. On the Bakhmut front, the Russians launched airstrikes near Stupochki, Oleksandro-Shultin and Dvorichna. Over 15 settlements, including Oleksandro-Shultin, Dvorichna, Druzhba, Pivnikny and Pivdent, Donetsk Oblast, came under Russian fire. On the Avdiivka front, Ukrainian forces successfully repelled all Russian offensive operations carried out with the support of aircraft and artillery in the vicinity of Avdiivka and Kharkiv, Donetsk Oblast. Russian forces conducted airstrikes near the settlement of Pantelymonivka, Donetsk Oblast, and shelled more than 15 civilian settlements, including Kharkiv, Berdichi, Avdiivka, Yasnobrodivka and Kharlivka, Donetsk Oblast. The General Staff of Ukraine's armed forces reported on July 13 that Russia had lost 236,040 troops in Ukraine since the beginning of its full-scale invasion on February 24 last year.